Jake and Zara reached the station's emergency control room just as the first hunter ship connected to the main docking port. Through their mental link, they could sense the Vorthic soldiers coming aboard. There were at least 12 of them all, armed and trained for combat. "They are spreading out to search the station," Zara whispered. 3 teams of 4 soldiers each. They know I am here somewhere. Jake was working on the control panel, trying to access the station's power systems. Through their bond, he could use Zara's knowledge of Vorthic technology to understand the alien components that had been added to the human equipment. "I can trigger an overload in the main reactor," Jake said. "But it will take 15 minutes to build up enough energy for a big explosion. We need to keep them busy until then. And we need to reach the emergency pods before the station explodes." The first team of hunters had reached the medical bay where they had been hiding. Jake could feel Zara's tension as she sensed their thoughts through the connection all Vorthic shared. They were confused to find evidence that someone had been there recently, but no sign of where that person had gone. "They can sense that I fed recently," Zara explained, "but they cannot understand how. There should be a dead or dying alien here, not an empty room." Jake finished programming the reactor overload, and they moved toward the emergency pod bay. But the corridor they needed to use was blocked by the second team of hunters. Through their link, Jake could feel Zara's combat instincts taking over. As she planned their attack, "Stay behind me," Zara said. "I will handle the soldiers." "No, we do this together." Jake was surprised to find that he could access Zara's fighting skills through their bond. When she moved to attack the hunters, he moved with her in perfect coordination. Zara used a plasma cutter to disable the first soldier's weapon, while Jake tackled the second one from behind. The fight was over in seconds. Jake had never been in real combat before, but through his connection to Zara, he fought like a trained warrior. At the same time, Zara used Jake's knowledge of the station's layout to anticipate where the other hunters would come from. "We make a good team," Jake said as they continued toward the pod bay. "Yes, this bond between us is making us stronger than either of us could be alone." They reached the emergency pods just as the third hunter team found the bodies of their companions. Jake could feel their anger and confusion through Zara's connection to their minds. The hunters had expected to find a weak exile hiding alone, not someone who could fight back effectively. The emergency pods were small single-person craft designed to get survivors away from a dying station. Jake chose 2 pods that were next to each other and began the startup sequence. Through their mental link, he shared the launch procedures with Zara while she watched for approaching enemies. 10 minutes until the reactor explodes," Jake reported. "We need to be clear of the station by then. The hunters have found us. They are coming this way." Jake could sense them too now. 8 remaining soldiers moving fast through the corridors toward the pod bay. They would arrive in less than 2 minutes, and the pods needed at least 3 minutes to complete their launch sequence. "I have an idea," Zara said, "but you are not going to like it." Through their bond, Jake saw what she was planning. Zara wanted to stay behind and hold off the hunters while he escaped in one of the pods. She could use her combat skills to delay them long enough for his pod to launch safely. "Absolutely not," Jake said firmly. "We escape together or not at all. Jake Morrison, be practical. One of us needs to survive, and you have a better chance than I do. The hunters want me alive, so they will be careful in their attack. That gives me an advantage. And it also means they will capture you eventually. I will not leave you behind." Jake felt Zara's frustration and affection through their link. She was touched by his loyalty, but worried that his stubbornness would get them both killed. At the same time, Jake could feel her fear, not for herself, but for him. The bond had made them care about each other in ways that went beyond simple friendship. The first hunter appeared at the entrance to the pod bay. Jake and Zara took cover behind the control console as plasma bolts began hitting the walls around them. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. 3 more minutes, Jake said, checking the pod status display. We do not have 3 minutes. More hunters entered the bay and began surrounding their position. Jake and Zara were trapped with nowhere to run. Through their mental connection, Jake could feel Zara preparing to make a final desperate attack to give him a chance to reach the pod's dot. But then something unexpected happened. The station shook violently, and all the lights went out. Emergency. Power kicked in a few seconds later, bathing everything in red light. Jake checked his readings and saw that the reactor overload was happening faster than he had calculated. The explosion will happen in 5 minutes, not 10, Jake realized. The station's power grid is more damaged than I thought. This changed everything. The hunters had not expected the station to explode so soon, and they were not prepared for the emergency. In the confusion, Jake and Zara made their move. They sprinted toward the nearest pods as the station shook again. The hunters fired at them, but their aim was off in the dim red lighting. Jake threw himself into the first pod, while Zara dove into the second one. Launch sequence initiated, the pod computer announced. 60 seconds to departure. Through the pod's small viewport, Jake could see the hunters regrouping for another attack. But then the station shook so hard that several of them fell down. Sparks began flying from damaged systems, and the air filled with smoke. Jake, Zara's voice came through the pod's communication system. I can sense something wrong through our bond. You are hurt. Jake looked down and saw blood on his shirt. One of the plasma bolts had grazed his side during the run to the pods. The wound was not serious, but it was bleeding steadily. I am okay, just a scratch. But through their mental link, Zara could feel his pain as if it were her own. More than that, she could sense his life energy draining away through the wound. Without thinking about it, she began pushing some of her own energy through their bond to help him heal. Jake felt a warm, tingling sensation spread through his body. The bleeding stopped and the pain faded away. But he could also feel Zara growing. Weaker as she shared her strength with him, Zara stopped. You are hurting yourself to help me. I cannot help it. The bond makes your pain my pain. If you are hurt, I must heal you. This was something neither of them had expected. Their connection was not just mental, but physical as well. They could share energy between them to heal wounds and restore strength. It was like being 2 parts of the same being. 30 seconds to launch, the computer announced. The hunters made one last desperate attack, rushing toward the pods with their weapons blazing. But it was too late. The launch sequence finished, and both pods shot out of the station like bullets from a gun. Jake watched through his viewport as Meridian Station fell away behind them. The hunter ships were still docked to the station, trying to evacuate their soldiers. They would not make it in time. The explosion came exactly when Jake's calculations predicted it would. The station's reactor overloaded in a brilliant flash of light that lit up the entire asteroid belt. When the light faded, there was nothing left but expanding clouds of gas and debris. Did we get them all? Jake asked over the communication system. I think so. I can no longer sense any Vorthic mines in this area. Their pods were small and had limited life support, but they were fast and hard to track. Jake programmed a course toward the nearest inhabited system, while Zara used her knowledge of Vorthec technology to modify their sensor signatures. Where do we go now? Zara asked. Somewhere we can figure out what this bond between us really means. And somewhere we can be safe while we do it. Through their mental connection, Jake could feel Zara's hope and gratitude. She had been alone and hunted for so long that the idea of having someone to trust completely was almost overwhelming. Jake Morrison, I do not know what we have become, but I am glad we became it together. Jake smiled as their pods flew toward the stars. So am I, Zara. So am I. Zara moved closer to Jake until she was sitting right next to him. Her pale blue skin felt cold against his arm, but her touch was gentle. Jake could smell something like flowers and metal coming from her hair. It was not unpleasant, just very different from anything human. I will place my mouth near your neck, Zara said softly. Try to stay relaxed. The more tense you are, the more uncomfortable this will be. Jake tilted his head to give her better access to his throat. His heart was beating fast, but he kept his breathing steady. I trust you. Zara looked at him one more time as if making sure he really meant it. Then she leaned forward, and Jake felt her breath on his neck. It was warmer than he expected. Her lips touched his skin first, just a soft pressure. Then he felt the sharp points of her elongated canine teeth press against his throat. The bite itself was quick and surprisingly painless. Jake felt two small sharp pricks, and then a warm spreading sensation that started at his neck and flowed down through his whole body. It felt like sinking into a hot bath after being cold for a long time. But then something else happened that neither of them expected. Instead of just feeling warm and relaxed, Jake suddenly found himself experiencing thoughts and emotions that were not his own. He could feel Zara's desperate hunger and her amazement that he was really letting her feed from him. But he could also feel her careful control as she took only what she needed and no more. At the same time, Zara was experiencing Jake's mind in a way that shocked her. Most beings she had fed from in the past had minds that were chaotic and hard to read. But Jake's thoughts were clear and organized. She could feel his genuine concern for her welfare and his determination to help, even though he was afraid. The mental connection grew stronger as the feeding continued. Jake began to see flashes of Zara's memories. He saw her homeworld with its purple skies and floating cities. He felt her childhood loneliness as the daughter of important people who had no time for her. He experienced her horror when she first saw Kravak feeding from a prisoner who screamed in agony the whole time. Zara saw Jake's memories too. She experienced his quiet life as a cargo hauler, moving supplies between distant worlds. She felt his loneliness, but also his satisfaction in doing honest work and helping people when he could. She saw the day his parents died in a transport accident and how he had chosen a life in space because staying on Earth hurt too much. The sharing of memories and emotions created something neither of them had expected. Instead of just a temporary feeding connection, they were forming a deeper bond that linked their minds in ways that should have been impossible. Jake felt Zara's strength returning as she drew energy from him. The silver markings on her skin began to glow brighter, and her breathing became deeper and more regular. But instead of feeling weakened, Jake felt strangely energized. It was as if the connection was flowing both ways, with each of them gaining something from the other. After several minutes, Zara pulled back from Jake's neck. The bite marks were already healing, and Jake felt only a slight soreness where her teeth had pierced his skin. But the mental connection between them remained strong and clear. How do you feel? Zara asked. Her voice was stronger now, and the pale blue color of her skin seemed more vibrant. Different, Jake replied honestly. I can still feel your thoughts in my head. Is that normal? Zara looked worried. No, it is not normal at all. The connection should be fading by now. Instead, it seems to be getting stronger. Jake could sense her concern through their link, but he could also feel something else. Zara was not just worried about the unusual bond they had formed. She was amazed by it. For the first time in her life, she had found someone whose mind connected perfectly with hers. Maybe this is what your people's old legends were talking about, Jake suggested. The permanent bonds you mentioned. Perhaps. But Jake Morrison, we do not have time to figure this out right now. I can sense something through our connection. There are ships approaching the station. Jake felt it too now that she mentioned it. Through Zara, he could somehow perceive the approaching vessels, even though they were still far away. There were 3 ships moving fast toward Meridian Station, and their intentions were not friendly. The hunters? Jake asked. Yes, Krevek soldiers. They must have been searching nearby. Systems and detected the station's emergency beacon. Zara stood up, and Jake was amazed at how much stronger she looked. The feeding had completely restored her health and energy. How long do we have? Perhaps 30 minutes before they dock. But Jake, there is something else you need to know. Because of our bond, they will be able to track me through you now. Even if we escape, they will be able to follow us anywhere we go. Jake felt a chill of fear, but it was mixed with determination. Then we better make sure they do not capture either of us. They moved quickly through the medical bay, gathering anything that might be useful. Jake found a functioning medical scanner and some emergency supplies. Zara located a small plasma cutter that could be used as a weapon. Through their mental link, they could coordinate their actions perfectly without needing to speak dot as they prepared to leave the medical bay. Jake realized something important. Zara, I can feel your emotions, and you can feel mine. But I can also sense your knowledge and skills. Is that normal? No. This bond we have formed is unlike anything in our recorded history. I can access your knowledge of human technology, and you seem to be accessing my combat training. Jake tested this by thinking about the plasma cutter in Zara's hand. Suddenly, he knew exactly how to use it, even though he had never seen one before. The knowledge came from Zara's mind through their connection. This could be very useful, Jake said. Yes, but it also means the bond between us is deeper than I thought possible. Jake Morrison, I do not know what we have become, but we are no longer entirely separate beings. They made their way through the station toward the docking bay, where Jake's ship waited. The emergency lighting flickered, and several times they had to detour around sections that had lost atmosphere. Through their link, they could sense the approaching hunter, ships getting closer. When they reached the docking bay, Jake was dismayed to see that his ship had taken damage. One of the landing struts had collapsed, and there was a large dent in the cargo hold. The station's failing systems must have caused some kind of accident. Can we still fly? Zara asked. Jake examined the damage through the viewport. Maybe, but not very far and not very fast. Those hunter ships will catch us easily in open space. Then we need to find another way to escape. Through their mental connection, Jake felt Zara accessing his knowledge of the station's layout. At the same time, he found himself drawing on her tactical training to analyze their situation. Working together through their bond, they began to formulate a plan. The station has emergency pods, Jake realized. Small single-person craft for evacuating the crew. And the station's power core is unstable, Zara added using Jake's technical knowledge. If we could cause it to overload ... the explosion would mask our escape and destroy any evidence we were here. They looked at each other and smiled. Through their link, each could feel the other's approval of the plan. It was dangerous and would require perfect timing, but it might work. We need to move fast, Zara said. The hunters will be docking soon. Jake nodded, and they ran toward the station's emergency systems. Behind them, the hunter ships grew larger, against the backdrop of stars. Soon Krevak soldiers would be aboard the station, searching for Zara, but they would not find the frightened exile, who had hidden in the medical bay. Instead, they would face something new. A human and a Vorthok, joined by an impossible bond, and determined to fight for their freedom together. Jake Morrison sat down on the floor next to the dying alien woman. His helmet lights made her pale blue skin look even stranger, but he was getting used to it. Zara watched him with dark eyes that seemed too large for her face. She looked confused, like no one had ever sat down next to her before. "Tell me how this feeding works," Jake said. "I want to understand what you need." Zara shook her head weakly. "Jake Morrison, you do not know what you are saying. No alien species has ever allowed a Vorthik to feed from them by choice. We are feared across the galaxy for good reason." "Maybe they just never met the right Vorthik," Jake replied. "You said your people have honor. That means something to me." 4. The next hour, Zara told Jake about her people and their strange biology. The Vorthik had evolved on a world where life energy flowed between all living things. They learned to tap into this energy through direct contact, usually through a bite. That connected them to another being's nervous system. It was not just blood they needed, but the electrical energy that powered thought and emotion. "Long ago, my people formed partnerships with other species," Zara explained. "It was not parasitic, but symbiotic. Both sides gained something from the connection, but wars and fear destroyed those old alliances. Now most beings see us only as predators." Jake listened while he watched the silver markings on her skin grow dimmer. "What happened to you? Why are you here alone?" Zara's face became sad and angry at the same time. "I was born into a high family on my homeworld. My parents arranged for me to bond with a powerful lord named Krevak. But Krevak was cruel and took pleasure in causing pain when he fed from others. I refused the arrangement and tried to leave." "They came after you?" "Yes. I stole a small ship and tried to reach the outer colonies where some of my people live in exile. But Krevak sent hunters after me. They caught my ship 3 days ago and destroyed it. I barely escaped in a life pod and made it to this station." Jake felt angry on her behalf. "So you were running away from a forced marriage to someone who hurt people, and now you are dying alone because of it." "That is a simple way to put it, but yes." Zara tried to smile, but she was too weak. "My people believe it is better to die with honor than to live in shame. I chose exile over submission. And I choose to help you over letting you die," Jake said firmly. Zara looked at him for a long time. "You really mean this, do you not? Even knowing what I am and what I need to survive?" "Yes, but I need to know exactly what will happen. Will it hurt? Will it change me? Could it kill me?" Zara thought carefully before answering. "The feeding itself should not cause pain if done properly. I would connect to your nervous system through small wounds from my canine teeth. Most beings describe it as a warm, tingling sensation. As for changes, the effects are usually temporary. You might feel tired for a day or two while your body recovers the energy I take. And the risk of death? Very low if I am careful. I would take only what I need to survive, not everything you have. But Jake Morrison, there has never been a case of a human allowing a Vorthik to feed voluntarily. I do not know if your biology is compatible with mine." Jake stood up and started pacing around the small area. His mind was working through the problem, like he was planning a difficult cargo run. There were risks, but there were also risks in doing nothing. If he left Zara here, she would die for certain. If he helped her, there was a chance they would both survive. "There is something else you should know," Zara said quietly. "The feeding creates a temporary connection between minds. You would experience some of my thoughts and emotions, and I would experience yours. It can be overwhelming for beings who are not prepared." "How long does that last?" "Usually just during the feeding itself. Perhaps a few minutes afterward." Jake stopped pacing and looked at her. "Would you be able to control yourself? I mean, if you get my life energy, will you be able to stop before you take too much?" "Yes," Zara said without hesitation. "My people are not mindless beasts. We can control our feeding carefully. I would rather die than harm someone who is trying to help me." Jake believed her. Something in her voice and the way she looked at him told him she was telling the truth. "Okay, I am willing to try if you are. Zara stared at him in shock. Jake. Morrison, are you certain? Once we begin, there will be no way to stop until it is finished. And if something goes wrong, then something goes wrong. But if we do nothing, you die anyway. And I have to live knowing I could have helped, but chose not to try. Tears started forming in Zara's large, dark eyes. Why would you do this for me? You do not even know me. Jake sat back down next to her. Because you asked for nothing and expected nothing. Because you would rather die than hurt me. Because sometimes the right thing to do is also the scary thing to do. Zara was quiet for several minutes. Jake could see her thinking hard about his offer. Finally, she spoke. If we do this, there are things you must know. The connection between our minds will be stronger than I first said. Humans have very intense emotional patterns, and the link might last longer than normal. How much longer? I do not know. Maybe hours, maybe days. There are old stories among my people about bonds that became permanent, but those are just legends. Jake felt nervous for the first time since he had made his decision. A permanent mental link with an alien was not something he had planned on. But looking at Zara growing weaker by the minute, he knew he could not change his mind now. There is one more thing, Zara said. If the hunters find us while we are connected, they will be able to track me through you. You would be in danger just by helping me. I am already in danger just by being here, Jake replied. At least this way we both have a chance. Zara reached out with a shaking hand and touched Jake's arm through his spacesuit. You are either very brave or very foolish, Jake Morrison. Probably both. Are you ready? I do not think anyone could be ready for this. But yes, I am ready to try. Jake took off his helmet and set it aside. The air in the medical bay was thin and smelled like metal and ozone, but it was breathable. What do I need to do? Just stay calm and trust me. The connection will feel strange at first, but do not fight it. Let it happen naturally. Zara moved closer to Jake with effort. Even in her weakened state, she moved with a grace that reminded him she came from a warrior species. She placed one pale blue hand on his shoulder and looked into his eyes. Thank you, Jake Morrison. No matter what happens, I will never forget this kindness. Jake nodded. Let us just focus on making sure we both survive to remember it. Jake Morrison pulled his old cargo ship closer to the dark space station. The metal hull of Meridian Station looked like a giant dead whale floating in the black space around the asteroid belt. Most of the lights were off, and only a few red emergency beacons blinked slowly in the darkness. Jake had been flying cargo runs for 15 years, and he knew a dying station when he saw one. His ship computer made soft beeping sounds as it connected to the station's docking system. The voice came through his speakers with lots of static noise. Docking Bay 7 is open for emergency use only. Life support is failing. Do not stay longer than 2 hours. Jake smiled to himself. Perfect. No station crew meant no questions about what he was doing here. His own ship needed spare parts badly, and abandoned stations were the best place to find them cheap. The engines were making strange noises, and the air recycler kept breaking down. Without repairs, soon he would be floating dead in space, just like this station. He put on his spacesuit and checked all the seals twice. The station might have air, but it would be thin and probably toxic by now. Better to be safe. Jake grabbed his tool bag and a small laser cutter from the storage compartment. If he was lucky, he could find some good salvage in just a few hours. The docking tube connected with a loud clang that echoed through both ships. Jake opened the airlock and stepped into the station. The gravity was still working, but it felt weak under his boots. Emergency lighting cast red shadows on the walls and made everything look like a bad horror. Movie. Jake walked down the main corridor reading the signs on the walls. Most sections were sealed off due to atmosphere loss. The cargo bays were empty, and the command center was locked down tight. But the medical bay was still accessible, and medical equipment was worth good money on the black market. The medical bay doors opened with a grinding sound that meant the motors were almost dead. Jake stepped inside and turned on his helmet lights. The room was a mess. Beds were turned over, and medical supplies were scattered across the floor. Someone had been here before him, but they had left in a hurry. Jake started picking through the debris, looking for anything useful. Most of the portable scanners were broken, but he found a few data pads that might still work. He was putting them in his bag when he heard a sound from the back of the room. It was soft, like someone breathing, but trying to be quiet about it. Jake froze and listened carefully. There it was again. Someone was hiding behind the overturned equipment near the back wall. Jake pulled out his laser cutter and set it to low power. Enough to scare someone, but not enough to kill them right away. I know you are there. Come out slow and keep your hands where I can see them. No answer. Just that soft breathing sound getting weaker. Jake moved carefully around the fallen medical beds, keeping his light pointed at the back corner. What he saw there made him stop completely. It was not a human hiding from him. The figure was curled up behind a broken diagnostic machine. It looked like a young woman, but her skin was pale blue and seemed to glow slightly in his helmet lights. She had long dark hair that covered most of her face, but Jake could see strange silver markings along her neck and arms. It looked like tattoos, but they seemed to move and shift as he watched. She was barely breathing, and her body shook like she was very cold. When she tried to lift her head to look at him, Jake saw her face clearly for the first time. She looked mostly human except for her pale blue skin and her teeth. When she opened her mouth to speak, he could see that her canine teeth were much longer and sharper than normal human teeth. "Please," she whispered in a voice so quiet Jake almost missed it. "Do not be afraid. I will not harm you." Jake kept his laser cutter ready, but he did not point it directly at her. She looked too weak to be dangerous to anyone. "What are you? How did you get here?" The alien woman tried to sit up, but she was too weak. She fell back against the wall, breathing hard. "My name is Zara. I am Vorthik. My ship was attacked 3 days ago. I escaped here, but the station was already dying." Jake had heard of the Vorthik before. They were warriors from somewhere near the Galactic Center. Most spacers told stories about them, but Jake had never seen one in person. They were supposed to be dangerous fighters who could drain the life out of other beings. "Are you hurt?" Jake asked. He was still holding his weapon, but something about her made him want to help rather than run away. Zara laughed, but it was a sad sound. "Not hurt in the way you mean. My kind needs something your kind does not understand. Without it, we die slowly. Over several days. Today is my 3rd day." Jake moved a little closer. The silver markings on her skin were definitely getting dimmer as he watched. "What do you need? Food? Water? Medicine?" "None of those things will help me." Zara closed her eyes, and her breathing became even more shallow. "My people must feed on the life energy of other thinking beings. We take it through our bite along with blood. Without this, we fade away and die." Now Jake understood why spacers told scary stories about the Vorthik. They were like the old vampire legends from Earth, but real and from outer space. "So you are dying because there is no one here for you to bite?" "Yes, but do not worry, human. I would not take from you without permission, even if I was strong enough to try. My people have honor even when we are desperate. You should leave this place before the raiders return. They may come back to make sure I am dead." Jake looked at this alien woman who seemed ready to die rather than hurt him. "Everything?" He had heard about the Vorthok, said they were monsters who killed without mercy. But Zara seemed more like a person who was scared and alone, and trying to face death with dignity. How long do you have? Jake asked. Zara opened her eyes and looked at him with surprise. Perhaps a few more hours. Why do you ask? Most beings run away when they learn what I am. Jake put his laser cutter back in his belt. Because maybe there is something I can do to help. The silver markings on Zara's skin flickered brighter for just a moment. You do not understand human. I am not like your kind. To save my life, someone would have to let me feed from them. No alien has ever done such a thing willingly. There is a first time for everything, Jake said quietly. Zara stared at him like he had just said something impossible. Maybe he had. But Jake Morrison had always been the kind of person who helped others when he could. He was not going to stop now, just because this time the person who needed help had fangs and blue skin. What? Is your name human? Zara asked. Jake Morrison. And I think we need to talk about how this feeding thing works. The space where the Starbound had been exploded into a writhing mass of twisted reality as the jump drive tore through the fabric of space-time itself. Jake watched his ship disappear into a swirling vortex of energy that bent light and matter into impossible shapes. The gravitational distortion reached out like invisible hands, grabbing the 5 hegemony vessels and crushing them against forces that no armor could resist. One by one, the machine ships crumpled like paper in a fist. As space-time folded around them, their mechanical screens echoed across all frequencies, as metal that had seemed invincible was reduced to scattered atoms. The distortion lasted only seconds, but when it collapsed back into normal space, nothing remained of the hegemony fleet except a slowly expanding cloud of metallic dust. Jake stood on the command deck of the Cytherian ship, surrounded by both human and alien crew members who had fought together against impossible odds. The silence that followed the destruction was profound, broken only by the quiet hum of life, support systems, and the distant sound of someone crying with relief. HFY stepped closer to Jake, her 4 arms hanging loose at her sides in what he had learned was a gesture of respect among her people. Your ship is gone, Captain Morrison. I am sorry for your loss. Jake nodded, feeling the weight of command and sacrifice settle on his shoulders. The Starbound had been more than just a ship to him and his crew. It had been their home, their sanctuary, their means of exploring the vast universe. Now it was gone, destroyed to save lives that had once been enemies. She served her purpose, Jake said quietly. She brought us together and gave us the chance to survive. I think she would have approved of how she ended. Ben approached Jake with tears in his eyes. The chief engineer had served on the Starbound longer than anyone except Jake himself. Captain, I downloaded the ship's entire technical database before we evacuated. Everything we learned, every modification we made, it's all preserved. The Starbound may be gone, but her knowledge lives on. Dr. Hayes joined them, her arms full of portable data storage units. I managed to save all our scientific records too, including everything we learned about the Cytherians and the hegemony. This information could be invaluable to both our species. HFY listened to the humans talk about preserving knowledge and learning from their experiences. In Cytherian culture, the focus after battle was usually on counting casualties and redistributing resources. But these humans seemed more concerned with what they could learn and how they could use that knowledge to prevent future conflicts. Kethmer approached the group with a data tablet in 2 of his hands. War Prime, I have completed analysis of the battle. The coordination between our vessels was unprecedented. The tactical efficiency increased by 300% when we shared targeting data and synchronized our attacks. Sam Brooks was moving among the injured crew members from both ships, treating human and Cytherian wounds with equal care. Several Cytherian warriors watched him work with fascination, still amazed by his gentle approach to medicine. Healer Vex, too, worked alongside him, learning new techniques that seemed to heal faster than traditional Cytherian methods. Tony Martinez found himself in conversation with War Second Deximer about the evacuation procedures. Your crew followed orders without question, Tony observed. But our people worked together because they wanted to, not because they had to. Both approaches have value. Deximer nodded thoughtfully. I have watched your security methods during this crisis. Your people fight harder when they understand the reasons for their orders. This is a concept worth studying. As the hours passed, and both crews settled into the cramped conditions aboard the Cytherian ship, Jake found himself spending more and more time in conversation with Zex-Hi. She was intelligent and thoughtful beneath her warrior exterior, and he discovered that they shared more common ground than he had expected. Your people intrigue me, Captain Morrison, Zex-Hi said, as they stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars wheel slowly past. You fight well when necessary, but you prefer cooperation to conquest. This is rare in our experience. Jake studied her profile as she looked out at the stars. In the soft lighting of the observation deck, her violet scales seemed to shimmer with hidden depths, and he found himself noticing details he had missed during their crisis. She was beautiful in an alien way that spoke to something deep in his human consciousness. Your people aren't what I expected either, War Prime. You're not just warriors. You're protectors. Everything you do is motivated by the desire to keep your people safe. I can respect that. Zex-Hi turned to look at him, her glowing eyes meeting his brown ones. You risked your ship and your crew to save mine. In Cytherian culture, such an act creates bonds that cannot be broken. You have proven yourself worthy of trust. What does that mean exactly? It means that you are no longer an enemy. You are. Something new in my experience. Perhaps your word friend applies, though the concept is difficult for my people to understand. Jake felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the ship's life support systems. I'd like to be your friend, Zex-Hi. I think our species could learn a lot from each other. The use of her personal name without her military title sent a shock through Zex-Hi's system. Among Cytherians, such familiarity was reserved for the far closest relationships. But coming from this human, it felt natural and right. Jake Morrison, she said, testing his name on her tongue. I find myself curious about human customs regarding friendship and partnership. Would you be willing to teach? And me? Over the following days, as they traveled toward the nearest inhabited system, the crew of both ships continued to work together and learn from each other. The cramped conditions forced close contact that broke down barriers and built understanding. Humans and Cytherians shared meals, compared stories, and discovered that despite their physical differences, they had similar hopes and fears. Ben found himself fascinated by Cytherian engineering techniques, while Cytherian technicians marveled at human approaches to system redundancy and repair. Dr. Hayes exchanged scientific theories with Kethmer, learning about Cytherian physics, while sharing human insights into biology and chemistry. But it was the growing relationship between Jake and Zex-Hi that captured everyone's attention. They spent hours in conversation, sharing stories about their respective cultures and discussing their experiences in space. What had begun as professional cooperation was clearly evolving into something deeper and more personal. Amy noticed it first. During a tactical briefing, when Jake and Zex-Hi unconsciously moved closer to each other while examining star charts, Sam observed the way they looked at each other during medical consultations for the injured crew members. Even Tony, usually focused entirely on security matters, commented on how naturally they worked together. The Cytherians were equally aware of their War Prime's changing behavior. Zizha's I had always been focused and disciplined, but now she seemed more relaxed, more willing to consider alternative approaches to problems. She asked questions about human emotions and relationships. That surprised her subordinates. War Prime, Kethmer said during one of their private conversations. Forgive my boldness, but you seem different since we began working with the humans. You appear more content. Zex-High considered his words carefully. I am learning new ways of thinking, Kethmer. The humans have shown me that strength can come from cooperation as well as dominance. It is a revelation that challenges everything I thought I knew about leadership and survival. The breakthrough came when they reached the edge of Catherian space and encountered a border patrol of 3 warships. The patrol commander, War Prime Gexdal, was suspicious and hostile when he learned that Zex-High had been cooperating with aliens. According to Catherian military law, unauthorized contact with unknown species was grounds for court-martial. War Prime Zex-High, you will transfer the alien prisoners to my ship immediately, Gexdal ordered. They will be interrogated and processed according to standard protocols. Jake felt his blood run cold at the word, prisoners. After everything they had been through together, the thought of being treated as captives was almost unbearable. But he also knew that Zex-High was in an impossible position, caught between her duty to her empire and her growing feelings for him and his crew. Zex-High stood straighter on her command deck, her 4 arms folding across her chest in a gesture of defiance. War Prime Gexdal, these humans are not prisoners. They are my allies and honored guests. They fought beside us against the hegemony and saved Catherian lives at great cost to themselves. Your personal feelings are irrelevant. Zex-High, military regulations are clear. Jake stepped forward, placing himself next to Zex-High in a show of solidarity. War Prime Gexdal, I request permission to speak. Gexdal's eyes narrowed as he studied the human who dared to address him directly. You will remain silent, alien. No, Zex-High said firmly. Captain Morrison is my equal and will be treated with respect. He has proven his worth in battle and earned the right to speak. The confrontation that followed would be remembered as a turning point in both species' history. Jake spoke passionately about the cooperation between human and Catherian crews, the tactical advantages of alliance over conquest, and the threat they